Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. If you're joining for the first time, it's great to meet you. I'm Rachel. I'm the host of the Hangout. If this is your first Hangout, as I know it is for Wayne too, this is an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and what's going on in the world of data science. So as I mentioned, the sessions are recorded and shared to YouTube, as well as our studio data science hangout site. So you can always go back and rewatch or find helpful resources there too. We always want to create spaces where everybody can participate and we can hear from everyone. So there's 3 ways that you can ask questions during these. So you can jump in live and raise your hand on Zoom. You can put questions in the Zoom chat. And feel free to put a little star next to it if you want me to read the question for you, if maybe it's a little loud where you are. But we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. And Tyler will share that. Oh, she was right ahead of me, shared it just in the chat. I just always like to reiterate, we love to hear from everybody, no matter your level of experience or area of work too. But today I am so happy to be joined by my co-host, Wayne Jones, Principal Data Scientist at Shell. And Wayne, typically we get these started with just having you introduce yourself a little bit and sharing a bit about the work that you do.
So my name's Wayne Jones. I'm a Principal Data Scientist in Shell. I've been there now for 15 years. Prior to that, my background has been in ecological modeling. So my PhD was in modeling the growth of fish. And following that, I went to work for a energy company, EDF, as a quantitative analyst. And then I went to work as a pricing consultancy for about 5 or 6 years. Then I've been at Shell for 15 years now. I would say most of the time I've been in the role of a statistical consultant, and I have and as such, you get exposed to lots and lots of different business problems across all manner of areas. For some, people might find quite surprising, given that I'm working for an energy company. Yeah, so, I would say certainly in the earlier years, a lot of my time has been spent developing open source software for environmental monitoring applications. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it'd be helpful too for everyone to understand a little bit more of what you do. I love the example of how you're using open source across the industry. And would you be able to share a little bit more about the work that you're doing there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I was hoping to do it more formally at some point in the future, and perhaps one of the meetups as well, so I could certainly give more details there, right? But groundwater monitoring is something that is a very open and transparent industry, basically, where we work with environmental regulators and we periodically monitor our sites, whether it be petrol stations or it be refineries or terminals, and we report out the latest status to the environmental regulators, and we work with them to develop the best solutions for remediation if there are any issues effectively. Right now, this is something that we work with a range of different environmental engineering companies as consultants, and they perhaps go out and do the sampling of the data, send the data to the lab, get concentration results back. And then in the past, there was lots of different ways of analyzing the same data. So there's an opportunity to standardize, make things easier for everyone, and to increase the level of interpretability from these data sets, right? So this basically created, in collaboration with the University of Glasgow, an application called GWSDAT. It's available as an R package, GWSDAT, and it stands for Groundwater Spatiotemporal Data Analysis Tool. And you guys can just download and it's free to use effectively. Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's all, and to summarize what it does effectively, it's there to identify trends in groundwater solute concentrations.
Thanks, Wayne. I'll share that in the chat window too. I just thought it's really important for people to to understand about as well, because I think you've done an amazing job building the community around that too. But I'd love to ask you and maybe kick off some of the questions with, what's something that you're most excited about with regards to data science in the next year or so?
Wow, that's a good question, actually. I can't really say a lot, but I mean, I suppose the most exciting thing I've done recently is I've been working on a bid with offshore wind, right? So the Dutch government, for example, they have, for each offshore wind site, they have different criteria for winning that bid effectively. And the one I was working on was on environmental and ecological aspects of having a wind farm, right? You know, how do you avoid bird strike, for example? How do you keep noise down? How do you monitor the environment? How do you demonstrate that you've had a net positive impact on the environment as well, right? And this kind of brought me back to my ecological modeling days, and it was really good. I can't give full details of the kind of stuff we're proposing as part of the bid, but I have to say it's very, very exciting. Yeah, and again, will be done in a very, if successful in the bid, it will be very open and transparent. So we'll be looking to develop open source solutions and also, you know, being open with data.
Well, while people are thinking of their own questions, I get the luxury of being able to ask you the questions that I want. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you've advocated for open source across the company and how you've kind of gotten people comfortable with the idea of open source.
Well, yeah, that's another good question, right? I would say, I'll give you an example. Given I've been in Shell for a long time, when we first started, not only did we, so let me roll it back a little bit, right? So when we first started using open source tools, we were actually challenged, right? You know, I remember speaking to an architect in Shell and him saying, don't bother investing in open source tools, Wayne, because they'll probably be banned by Shell in a couple of years' time, right? I mean, and look at how the future's, you know, panned out. It couldn't be any different, right? We use lots of open source tools like R and Python in our jobs on a day-to-day basis now. I suppose, you know, what we're advocating in terms of open source, how I've advocated it is by demonstrating the success I've had in GWS Start, right? And there's a will. Our data scientists really like the idea of making their code open source. So quite a few people come to me and ask for the, you know, the pros and cons of doing it, right? Now, for GWS Start, the business case for being open source is fairly, you know, open and shut, right? You know, it's open, transparent. You know, environment regulators haven't got a hell of a lot of money. They're not going to trust black box solutions, so it's an open and shut case. But we're expanding now, and our business leaders are opening their eyes to the benefits of being open source, where perhaps in the future we didn't see the benefit that we have now. Right, so it's becoming a more open culture.
That's great. Thank you. I see a lot of questions coming in now, both on Slido and through the chat. Joe, I see you put a question into the chat. Would you want to jump in?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Took me a minute to unmute there.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm curious, when you talk about standardizing tools, who's responsible for doing that? And, you know, are there examples out there of effectively standardizing tools for monitoring environmental impact?
So, yeah, so first of all, it's a global industry, right? So we do this across the different globes, and there's different standards in different areas of the globe, right? There are many industry bodies that advocate best practice in these areas, right? And you'll see in the list of GWS references where we are actually referencing best guidance, get best guidance documents. And this, if you like, is a kind of document which outlines statistical techniques in a digestible fashion to environmental engineers. Yeah, so, you know, it's those kind of best practices, those kind of industry bodies was helping the standardization and the level of interpretation of this kind of data set. Yeah, in other countries, right, it's not quite as developed. All right, and that's one of the things I'm particularly proud of with Gilerestat, right? You know, is that because it's open source, there's no barriers to its use, and it gets used globally, right? It gets used every. You know, I'm really really surprised about where it gets used. So the last person who joined the Gilerestat group on LinkedIn is from Yemen, right? We've got people from, you know, all over the globe, Australia, America, you know, quite well, especially America, right? But then, you know, you're talking like Malta, China, Pakistan, you know, it truly is a global tour. So that's one of the things I'm most proud about.
Amazing. Wayne, random question for you. Do you happen to have a blind right in front of you that you could close? Because we can't see part of
If
your face sometimes.
if that works a bit better. Does that work a bit better?
A bit better. Yes, there we go. We can. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Mubanga, I see you also just put a question to the chat if you want to jump in.
Hi, Rachel, and hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Rachel, for the chance. Wayne, I would just like to find out if your Shiny app is built using Golem, the package Golem.
Ooh, do you know what? I've never heard of Golem, if I'm honest with you. Maybe you can tell me a bit about it. So obviously, I haven't heard about it. It's just not written using Golem.
I think Golem, the package it's a similar paradigm to the question that Joe asked, right, about standardization. So it's a package that allows you to develop Shiny apps using a standard method that essentially Colin Fay says the app, the Golem allows you to build industrial Shiny apps that are robust. And so he has a certain methodology that you follow in Golem to build the Shiny app. So I was just wondering if that is what was used to build this app.
Well, it isn't, and I will certainly check out Golem because it sounds very interesting, right? It might not have been around when we were doing this, to be fair, because it was quite a while ago since we first developed this version of Gilerestat. I can see why Golem's been built, right? Because you know, Shiny is absolutely fantastic for the smaller apps, right? But the large, big industrial apps, sometimes if you don't design it properly, it can become rather unwieldy and very hard to support and maintain, right? You know, and that's really important in the spirit of open source. Is to make it a way that someone can come and run with it for themselves, right? But you know, if it's a big cluster of different functions in R and Shiny, which is not particularly well designed, and then doing that is very, very hard. So I will certainly check out Golem for future Shiny applications, and thanks for that.
Thanks, Mubanga. I see there's a few anonymous questions too on Slido, Wayne, and one was, what have been some of the biggest changes in open source data science in your last 15 years with Shell?
Yeah, that's a good, first of all, I would say it's been the adoption to begin with of open source open source tools. And if I roll it back even further, you know, when I was in university doing a PhD, it was an old-fashioned computer lab, and we had the old Unix machines, right? And they were, I think, about £20,000 each, and that's over 20 years ago now, right? And then you also, you had something called S Plus instead, right? And the license was about £20,000 a year and all the rest of it, right? But within the time that I had finishing my PhD, we'd moved to Linux, which meant you could install on just using standard PCs, which obviously saved about, you know, £19,000 per PC. And we had started using R, which saved all the license costs for this plus and all stuff like that. So that's going back. That's a long way, and that saves a maths department lots of money. So we probably could keep on more staff as a consequence of that, right? And all the benefits. Coming back to Shell now, you know, I see, you know, changes from my perspective is, first of all, there was a reluctance to adopt open source software, right? So, you know, discussions of those architects, but they just didn't trust it from an architectural security perspective, right? And some of them fears could still be warranted now, right? But there's also about the technical correctness of the underlying algorithms as well, right? So in the past, I've done work in R, and we've had to double check it in SAS, right? Okay, because the people that traditionally did this didn't really trust that. It was still the new kid on the block, right? But then in my experience, because R has such a large user base, then lots of the functionality gets a hell of a lot of testers, right? And you don't, you know, and generally speaking, especially for the packages which have been used at high volume, it's very, very mathematically correct. Indeed, I've seen mistakes in some commercial offerings of software because they're just not tested to the same amount. So then there's the adoption of open source, and then there's the actually making open source. So, you know, stories like me, where, you know, we don't have this very protective business model, right? We realize that there's benefits in doing open source software. That is a benefit, is one example of that as well. So not only are we using open source tools, we're giving back to the open source community now as well, engaging the open source community.
Thank you, Wayne. Another anonymous question that was there was, do you see new types and categories of use cases where machine learning or AI methods are particularly useful in providing a solution, like better predictions or classification, for example?
So new types of machine learning, and can you repeat?
I think, yeah, sorry, it was a little bit of a longer question. Do you see new types of use cases where machine learning methods are particularly useful in providing a solution?
Yeah, so, I mean, Shell's business model is completely changing, right? You know, there is an energy transition, and more and more and more, I'm involved in what we refer to as renewable energy solutions problems, right? So this is related to low carbon technologies, such as wind, solar, carbon sequestration projects, and these are all fairly new, right? You know, and and the scale and the speed at which developments are happening in this space are quite surprising, right? So all the machine learning technologies are being used to a lesser or greater degree, right? You know, we're using all manner of different technologies, whether it be basic, simple time series forecasting. Machine vision is also a strong one, so that's the deep learning. LSTMs when it comes to solar forecasting. When I first started in Shell, right, I was almost a heretic for bringing to the table random forest, right? But then now again, why don't we, you know, random forest and machine learning algorithms such as that are becoming par for the course as well. Another big use case that we have, and I suppose our big ticket item, is predictive maintenance, right? This is where we listen to the data continuously streaming, look out for anomalies, and warn people when we think components are about to fail. So you can plan for failure rather than reacting to failures when they actually occur. So the answer to your question is loads, right? That I mean, I could keep on going for a very long time, right? There's loads of different new and novel applications coming in the, and are mostly associated with the transition in the energy.
Thank you, Wayne. There are a lot of questions coming in about like using open source at Shell and and how you are able to advocate for that. And so I want to say, if other people are experiencing this too and want to jump in the conversation, feel free to jump in too and raise your hand. One of the questions was, you said your leaders are much more supportive of open source because they're recognizing the benefits. What benefits exactly are they most vocal about?
Ooh, goodness, right. Okay, so I mean, I guess it has to do with the themes around machine learning and AI, right? You know, back in the day, you know, when I was this consultant in Shell, we were rather a niche, and there wasn't the general IT support for us, right? So we typically did skunk projects, basically, right? And we just had our own IT infrastructure and all the rest of it. But now, you know, it's completely gone, you know, huge scale, right? And Shell as a business, and I'm sure lots of other businesses as well, we have the IT departments basically working with us now, right? Supporting us in our endeavors because they can see the benefits of it basically as well, right? And I would say things like Python and R, they understand the benefits of deploying these open source solutions for capabilities in their machine learning and AI, for example, right? So, and indeed, it's the chosen method to go. If you didn't have, you know, if you didn't go open source, there wouldn't be a hell of a lot of choice out there either, for that matter. So it's really is been revolutionary. I'm talking about the last 10 years, I would say, not just recent. Yeah.
Thanks, Wayne. I see, Joey, you had kind of a follow-up question to this as well. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I guess, thanks. Already answered the first half of my question, but I guess I'll follow up more specifically. How do you get around the topic of lost revenue to, you know, when we see so many companies out there making money off of proprietary methods? Really a follow-up on the last question. What are the most persuasive arguments that you've used or seen to advocate for the adoption of open source data science?
I guess I'll use, again, GWStat as an example, right? Two reasons, right, is one, it's transparent, right? And we're not hiding anything, right? Because if you if you're a company selling your software, then you're not going to give your IP away by letting people see underneath the hood, right? And the second one is cost, right? You know, people. So, and in the case you start working, right, environmental regulators, we're saying this is open source, we're making it publicly available so that other people can use it as well. So there's greater adoption. Greater adoption means better, the more you trust it, basically. And the fact it's open source, there's nothing to hide, it's demonstrating completely what's underneath the hood. It's all visible to see. So you build that trust, and also it's free to use. So there's no barriers to, such as, you know, like environmental regulators using it for themselves. Yeah. So though, certainly in my scenario, that's where we see the biggest benefits of having, you know, using and distributing open source software. In other areas, it can be a bit of a grey area, right? You know, you have to, and my steer has always been, you've got to make that business case bulletproof before you go and open source your software, right? Because one thing I would say about it is that it is a one-way street, right? Once you made it open source, you can't recover it back. So you better make damn sure when you do make it open source, it's for the right reasons, and you know, you've had clearance from the business to do it. Yeah. Hope that answers the question, Joe.
Thanks for the questions too, Joe. I see, Tim, you had another question in the chat. Do you want to jump in? We can't hear you yet, but I see that you've unmuted. so I'll read the question, and if you want to add more context, feel free to jump in. But it was, did you hit performance or scale bottlenecks in the real-time processing of sensor data for maintenance projections? And if so, how did you address them?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Now, if you look online, you might see lots of presentations about this from Dan Jevons, our VP, effectively, right? Out there, we have millions of sensors, pumping out data points on a second by second basis. So there's a huge volume of data. So we've actually partnered up with a company called C3.ai, and this is an industrial scale, highly distributable, highly scalable way of deploying solutions, analytical solutions to lots and lots of data. So it's obviously cloud-based, Spark-based technology at an industrial scale. Yeah. So if you're going to have a look at C3.ai, this is sort of Shell's chosen partner to develop these solutions at scale. And I think you can deploy, R and Python-based scripts. And the clever part is how you distribute and allocate them jobs and coordinate and orchestrate them jobs.
And you're using Sparkly R to interface with those?
Not Sparkly R. I think most of the applications is Python basically on C3. Okay, so it's PySpark basically. However, I have done work with Spark R, not Sparkly R, right? So, and there's a video out there somewhere of us talking about parallelization. Now, it is quite a long while ago now, right? So it was kind of novel at the time, but this, technology's progressed, and it's just something people can do very, very easily now, and it was about parallelizing large jobs. If I can find it, I will share the link. Yeah,
I can try and find it on the background too. But Wayne, I was curious about GWS stat and the success of it. Do you think it has a little bit to also do with the work you went into branding it and like communicating it out to others as well?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, right? And I guess I would say we haven't heavily branded it. We haven't branded it with the Shell logo or anything like that. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that's not what I mean. Just like GWS stat looks like something that exists on its own. You have a logo as well, and I'm just interested in the process of branding it.
Branding it, well, I suppose it's not something we thought a great deal about, if I'm honest with you, right? It certainly in the first versions of it, it looked pretty ugly sometimes as well, right? But its value is in the functionality rather than the actual image of GWS, that I would say, right? I'd say University of Glasgow have been the ones who have been advocating and getting me to sort of come up with a more consistent brand identity for it as well. We could have it's grown organically without much marketing or branding for that matter, right? So more and more and more, we're not knocking on people's door to demonstrate the rest that, people are knocking on our doors, right? And it's kind of it's a very specific industry, right? A very specialist industry. So, so it's a specialist tool for a specialist industry. But one of the things we did talk about was using that functionality, making it more generic, and perhaps using it in more general purpose environmental things. It's geared up towards hydrocarbon solutes within groundwater. You could use it for something else. It could be plotting spatial temporal distributions of other chemicals in lots of different places. So I'm not sure if I answered the question there, if I'm honest with you, right? But so brand is something, so just to summarize and paraphrase, right? Brand is something we haven't thought a great deal about. Marketing is something we could have done more of, but we're okay. People are coming to us to ask for it now. Going forward, it's business as usual, I think.
Understood. Yeah, I loved when I was playing around with the site that it includes case studies of other teams that are using your work too, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and I keep on finding them, right? And I found another one the other day. In fact, we've also just released an article on some of the most recent case studies as well, right? So I'll put the link up there for case studies, but I will see if I can find the link to the article as well.
Awesome. I see Libby asked a great question in the chat too, and it was, when you were in undergrad or grad school, is this career path something you could have imagined for yourself?
No, I never thought I'd be this lucky, to be honest, if I was honest. I mean, being able to spend most of my time in North Wales, have it in a role where you're given quite a lot of autonomy, and freedom to explore the things which interest you. And I never dreamt it would be so, and the work-life balance as well, right? And I was thinking about this the other day, actually. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd have it so good.
That's wonderful to hear.
So William sounds like he's a Welsh speaker by the sounds of it. Are you there, William?
Dwi wrth fy modd efo data science.
Da iawn, da iawn. Yn lle wyt ti dod o? We'll speak.
Love it.
Where do you come from in Wales, William?
Near Wrexham.
I'm in Belsacoed, which is about 20 miles for the rest of everyone else. Yeah.
Used to go camping there a lot at Llanroost.
Oh,
A bit off topic, sorry.
No worries.
get in touch afterwards, all right? On the LinkedIn or something. Good to have local.
Wayne, I saw that Joe had asked another question as well around AI ethics frameworks. What sorts of AI ethics frameworks are applied at Shell and in open source data science in general?
You know what? That's a really good question, right? And the way I would describe it is work in progress at the moment, right? You know, at the moment, I think the way it stands now, it's important, obviously, but it's going to be becoming increasingly important as AI gets more sophisticated, right? So I think, you know, there's lots of people in Shell working on building an AI ethics framework, right? I can't comment any further other than to say it's work in progress, right? But we really do recognize that, you know, there could be some, this is very, very important, especially when AI is more ubiquitous, right? And, you know, at the moment, if some of our algorithms go wrong, right, they're not, you know, life-threatening, right? But that could potentially change in the future, right? So we need to be prepared for that and understand what the risks are involved. Yeah.
Wayne, I remember when we were chatting, maybe this was a few months ago now, but you talked a bit about how you collaborate with Excel users too. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, or best practices that you have for people who are working with all kinds of different data people, and maybe they don't use R or Python.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I mean, because when we designed Gila Restart, you know, it was in in mind that it's not a statistician, it's not our programmers that are going to be using it, it's environmental engineers, right? And we wanted the barrier of entry to be as low as possible, okay? So the primary user interface for GREStat, as it was designed in the first instance, is an Excel add-in effectively, right? Where users have an Excel add-in menu, which behind the scenes connects with our, grabs the data, sends it to R, uses GREStat package and uses Shiny to give you the graphic user interface. So, you know, no one has to do any R programming effectively. It's a point and click. What you see is what you get kind of interface. Yeah. However, the code is openly available, and we do have pull requests from environmental engineers, you know, who wanted something updated in the software and all the rest of it. Yeah. So it works. It really does work in that respect. Yeah. So good question. There are a few hacks in the background to make it work in Excel, right? Effectively, how it works is in Excel, it takes the settings and the data and puts it into a temporary sets of CSV files and temporary notepad file, and then it looks at the registry to see where R lives, and then it uses R in batch mode, right? So grab them temporary files and run Excel and run Shiny and the GREStat package like so. Yeah. So they don't. That's our little trick for getting it to work in the background effectively.
I know that's something that has come up quite a bit on like past calls or meetups too. So how did you communicate with people how to use this effectively?
Say that again, sorry.
Like for example, thinking of the Excel user who's going to use it, how did you communicate with different stakeholders how they should use the tool?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, the reason we used Excel to begin with is because they all managed their data in Excel anyway, right? And prior to GREStat, you know, they were doing the analysis typically in Excel, right? You know, one of the benefits in using GREStat is not the sophisticated trend detection, is sometimes just a simple plotting functionality, right? You know, building a 3x3 plot in Excel might take you all day, right? Whereas you could do it in Shiny GREStat interface, you know, in a couple of clicks, just with a couple of clicks of the mouse. Yeah. In our case, you know, Excel was the natural entry point, okay, because that's where people used it, right? And in terms of how they used it, we did it with a combination of, we have a user manual, right? And we have webinars, and whenever people ask for help, we can step in and give them introductions and all the rest of it. We are in the process of actually coming up with some videos, right? University of Glasgow, our student Peter there is looking to create some videos at the moment as well. Yeah, I would say training is probably our weakest point at the moment. I would say it's getting to the point where we've got lots and lots of users now, and people are crying out for training. Right now, we don't have the time. I mean, and this is perhaps one of the bad things about open source software, right? You know, because we don't charge a license fee, we've only got you know, it's only our own time that's going into this one, you know. So providing training is expensive, time consuming, right? And we don't get, you know, there's no cost model there to recover it effectively, right? So I'd say maybe that, so what we're trying to do is come up with a basic set of training videos that we can share and are open to everyone, you know. But, you know, yeah, maybe that's one of the negative things about being in open source, that it doesn't generate the revenue to provide training, for example, right? Yeah. One point.
I see Livy asked another question. And as a reminder, if you want to ask questions in the chat and put a little star next to it, I can read them out loud too. But it was, Wayne, can you think of one big decision or choice that changed the course of your career in data, whether that's education, taking a chance on a job, deciding to leave a job, or something more personal?
Yeah. I've never really planned. Funny enough, I'm not particularly ambitious, right? Especially when I was younger, I just used to make decisions on a whim, right? But I would say the biggest career-changing move has been actually moving to Shell, right? You know, and that was actually my reasons for moving to Shell is that I wanted to move back to North Wales because I was seeing a lady in North Wales, right? So it wasn't even for the benefit of my career, if I'm being totally honest here, why I joined Shell, right? But it turns out, I think it was the best choice I've made. I like working here. It's got, you know, good work-life balance, really interesting projects, good colleagues. So, you know, and it's scale as well, right? It's very big, so there's loads of opportunity. You're not micromanaged, and you know, you're free to carve out the spaces that you see fit, you know, that you're interested into.
That's great. Thanks, Wayne. Thinking about your team at Shell, what does that look like, the data team? Is it split up into data scientists or data engineers, or what is your team like?
Ooh, that's another good question, right? So we've changed quite a lot, right? You know, so back a few years ago, maybe only as little as 5 or 6 years ago, we effectively had a statistical consulting team, right? I think about 15, 20 people. And, you know, now I would say those 15, 20 people are basically embedded in other roles as senior managers typically nowadays, right? So you've got a whole range of different teams. I actually sit within data science, and within data science, we have optimization, we have statistical consulting, we have the data scientists themselves, all right? And you've got other teams like machine vision, artificial intelligence as well. So it's gone really, really big now. Effectively, it's very big, and I think the whole organization is. I think there's over 100 in data science only, and that's not including, you know, machine vision, artificial intelligence. So the whole thing's exploded basically. Yeah. As for my role, you know, it gets to, you know, position in your career when you're forced to make a choice between going down the managerial route or the technical route, right? I was kind of offered an opportunity in the managerial. I don't want that. And it kind of crystallized me that we want to go down the technical career path. And in Shell, I'm happy to say, you know, there's a very organized career structure with job ladders, and, you know, effectively you have in a technical career path, you could become what's called a principal science expert, which I'm happy to say I was awarded in 2019. And that's kind of recognition that you're a senior technical leader, and your job, you know, if you go down that route, is basically to be a technical expert and technical leadership in this field. I'm a tech manager, I'd say.
I think that's a great point, Wayne. When we talk around about data science leadership, it doesn't always mean managing people as well. So as the data science leader on a technical side, what are some of the decisions that you have to make?
Yeah, just coming back to people, right? It's not just because I'm going down a technical career path doesn't mean that I don't work or manage people, but I suppose the difference is you tend to, instead of being a team lead or a manager, you tend to be more of a mentor, right? So this is bringing, you know, and I do this for the Royal Statistical Society as well. You know, I've mentored a few people to get the chartered status, and I get a lot out of it, right? Just be purely nosy as well, if I'm being totally honest, into different industries, just to see what it's like in other places. But yeah, I do like mentoring people and trying to shape their careers and trying to get them on the right path, and use the benefit of my experience, you know, to help them in their path. You know, I would say the biggest thing is, you know, particularly in Shell, is, you know, you have to use your initiative, right? You know, if you see white space, put your name on it. I remember what someone said to me, yeah, use your initiative. But talking about, I would say this is the team leads, at the moment, the biggest challenge we're having in this space is recruitment, right? And I think that, but this is a challenge not just in data science, but also in lots of different areas. I've never known such a jobs market to be so liquid, and never known so many opportunities, right? It's definitely, a job. If you're looking for a job, I've never known it so healthy. People are spoilt for opportunity out there, basically, at the moment, not just in data science, but in a whole range of other industries as well. Yeah. So it's definitely a seller's market, guys. That's all I'd say. Yeah.
I love that you just brought up mentorship there too. And I'd love to just dive deeper into that. If you have maybe some tips for us all who want to reach out and help mentor people but don't really know where to get started. Like, is it do you have a formal program at Shell for mentorship?
Yeah, yes. Well, semi-formal, semi-informal, I would say, right? What I try and do is people who identify themselves fairly early that they want to go down a technical career path, I basically help shape them into giving them advice as to what they need to do to start achieving that, right? And it's something that, obviously deep technical expertise doesn't come overnight. It takes a long time, right? And, we try and make sure that people who want to go down this career track try and get the right sort of skills and background there as well. Working with universities, I think, is a good one, right? Something I really like doing is working with different academic institutions. I've got a good relationship with University of Glasgow. I'm one of their member of staff now. Also got good relationship with University of Lancaster, University of Newcastle, UCL and as well, right? And that's part of one of my job is I'm trying to advocate that we build more academic relationships in Shell, right? I think, the coronavirus has paused that, right? And I think we need to reinvigorate and restart that as well. And that's one of my roles as the senior technical leader to promote those relationships.
What skills do you tell technical leaders to focus on? Or the people you're mentoring?
Yeah, it very much depends on the domain, right? So, being a principal science expert in Shell, you're talking about a very diverse set of skills, right? Typically got lots of chemists as well, geologists, data scientists, so it would, what I tell people if they want to go down the technical career path is to just soak it all up, right? The best you can, right? Because as you go perhaps further into your career, maybe further up the food chain, right, you get less time to do technical work, right? You seem to get dragged in other directions, right? So when you're early on in your career, like doing a PhD as well, right? You have a lot of time to do technical work. So soak it up, kids, and use your initiative. There's lots of training material to do whatever you want to do out there now, right? It's not like, years and years ago when, everyone had to go to the library and get the books, stuff like that, right? YouTube, and it'll tell you 4 or 5 different ways to explain the same problem, right? I'll give you an example of using initiative, right? We bought some, this is going back again, we bought some new PCs, ran some algorithms, realized they weren't running any quicker, right? And it was like, why not? Well, the reason is because even the PC was quicker, more powerful. It's by virtue of it had more cores, right? But each core was the same sort of processing power. So, and some of the algorithms we were using they were just single-threaded, just multi-threaded. Whereas, we wanted to move to a multi-threaded. So I looked just on my own back, right? I looked into parallel processing in R, and then when we actually had some more use cases in that. I started using this parallel processing, right? That got me noticed with some of the guys. And then when Spark came in, I was the person to do the pilot with Spark app, for example, and it ended up with me and the now VP, on a Spark conference explaining what we've done there, right? So that's just one example of using an initiative. Don't hold back, right? Don't wait, just do it.
I like that. I was writing that down, using your initiative.
Yeah.
Santiago, I see you put a question into the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hey, Rachel. Hey, Wayne. I had a quick question related to the job market comments you mentioned earlier. What skills do you look for when hiring someone? And what aspects of the interview process have you found to be most useful to assess a candidate's qualifications?
Yeah, this is, yeah. I mean, in terms of, what I'd be looking for is good technical depth, right? But also, if you're working in industry as well, you need to be able to explain and communicate yourself as well, right? And this is perhaps somewhere where the sort of data scientists could learn a bit more, right? Still go to conferences and see really, really badly presented presentations are very, very good pieces of work, right? And I think in industry, you're at a real benefit if you can be both technically good, right, and also very good at communicating these often complex principles to non-mathematicians as well. Yeah. So, and often these skills are kind of mutually exclusive or compete with one another effectively. It's hard to get a combination of those two things together effectively. Yeah. And as for the interview process, right, I think some of my colleagues advocate doing, programming tests or analytical tests beforehand, right? Some people actually swear by them, to be fair, right? But had that been the case, I probably wouldn't have got into Shell because I'm not very good at tests like that, if I'm honest with you, right? So for that reason, I'm not so enamored with these tests. I think you just get to a good feel with a candidate, when you talk to them and when you start talking about technical stuff, you get an idea quite quickly whether that person knows what he or she is talking about.
Thanks, Wayne. On that idea or that topic of communication, I see Toyin asks, any tips for enhancing those communication and translation skills?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the expert in in that, but there's a colleague in Shell, and she has, compiled lots of hints and tips about doing it as well. There's courses you can take as well, right? Off the top of my head, I can't quote or think of any of them, right? But then what's helped me is mentors, right, for one thing, and business consulting, right? So one of the things when I first joined Shell was most impressed about is it's people's ability to communicate very well. Yeah. And for someone, so, if you spot someone who you think is really good at communicating, right, and you're impressed by them, just buddy up, right? Say, look, I like the way you did that. Can you give me some hints and tips as to how you do it, right? And often there's the basic stuff as well. Like, the trouble is with data science, you kind of focus in on a very small area sometimes, and you get kind of obsessed by the details, right? And I think I've done a presentation about data storytelling in the past, right? And one of the first things I advocate is to step back some more. So when you're presenting a problem, you give the bigger picture and you narrow into the data science technical details rather than actually, obsessing about the details, immediately, right? You've got to bring the people with you. And the other hint I would say is empathy. All right. If you think more empathetically, right, then that will go a long way. So instead of thinking about it from a data science, put yourself in the customers or the client's shoes and think about it from their perspective. That really helps, right? Really helps. Those are my 2 tips.
I love that. I think that's the way I should have framed that earlier question around the branding of the work that you do, because I think it's actually the empathy that you put into all the work that you do.
Yeah, I think I really do think, right, if there's one tip I would give to people, is with more empathy, you'd make yourself a better consultant. Yeah, just put yourself in the client's shoes.
Definitely. Steve, I really liked the comment that you put into the chat earlier too. Do you want to jump in? Around being a tech person and advocating for learning about everyone else's role.
Yeah, I'm just repeating what Wayne's just said. And that you really need to learn everybody else's language so you can communicate on the same level.
Yeah.
For sure, definitely. Yeah, do you find, the question in there too was, do you find that technical people are overlooked and that people managers take priority?
I mean, I can only speak for Shell, right? And the answer to that is no, right? I think, maybe in the past that was the case, but, people are valued now for their technical skills and not just their managerial skills. Deep technical expertise has always been valued in Shell and will continue to be so.
Thank you all for the great questions too. I just want to make sure that there aren't certain things that I've missed from the chat. I'm just scrolling through and looking at the notes Tyler has sent over to me too. Santiago, do you want to share a bit more about what you just put into the chat?
Sure. Talking about presentations and whatnot, we use Scrum methodologies on our team. One of the ceremonies is every 2 weeks. Whenever the sprint's over, we review something. I've started to, just to practice presenting in front of people, just presenting something, anything, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, just trying to be succinct about it. For some reason, I still get nervous when I present virtually, which doesn't make any sense to me because I'm in my home, I'm comfortable, but just seeing the cubes in front of me makes me a little bit nervous. Just getting those reps in I found to be useful. And there was a comment a little further up in the chat that said, ask for feedback. That's been valuable because you can present something terribly, but unless somebody tells you it's terrible, you just don't know.
Yeah. Apparently recording yourself is a good one, right, to do. I admit it, but I hate watching myself on video, from what but yeah, I'm going to bring in the Wales angle here, right? And actually school, when it comes to nerves, right? A lot of people are nervous in terms of presenting, right? And I think eventually, you do get more confident, right, as you do more. So you obviously encourage yourself to do more as well, right? But from Wales, I think one of the scariest things I had to do is go to the Eisteddfod. So this is a national pageant, and as a child, you have to do it. You have no choice, right? And you sit in the front of on a stage in front of, hundreds of people basically, right? And I suppose it's trial by fire, right? If you can cope with that, then you can cope with presenting. Another thing I really like in school is to get young children to talk to the rest of the class without being nervous is when you bring something into the class that you really cared about, right? So bring in something, and then you get a child, they're not thinking about the fact that they're having to present something to the rest of the class. They're just thinking about this toy or dolly that they bought in, and I think that can help overcome some nervousness as well. So and that's one of the things I said in the data storytelling webinar, basically, was that.
I remembered my follow-up I was going to ask you before about the communication tips, and you mentioned your colleague who has some great tips that they share. I was trying to Google it and I realized shell is a hard thing to Google because it's bringing up like Linux shell.
Oh, right. Yeah.
If you happen to have those tips or you find them, would you be able to share them with us?
Yeah, definitely. I'll see if I can do that.
Awesome. Yeah, it doesn't have to be right now. I can put it in like with the recording too. But I think that would be great.
Cool. I'll see if I can dig them out.
Awesome. One question I realized I missed, and I know we're a little bit over. Do you have a few more minutes?
Fine, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Joe had asked, he's on a train right now, but asked, we hear people talk about potential for data science to solve climate change. From your perspective, is Shell well positioned to push the needle here? Or are there coalitions that can drive the data-driven social or political changes we need?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, right? And I think, data science and statistics and optimization has lots of roles to play in that, right? So for example, some of the stats group has been doing lots of work in detection, leak detection. So this is identifying leaks of, say, methane or CO2, right? So that obviously is a direct benefit to the environment. Stuff like geostat has an benefit on the environment. Climate is different. We're doing lots of weather modeling, and we're moving to low carbon technologies, and we're bringing our data science to bear on those low carbon technologies, such as wind, for example. We're doing optimization around wind. Another interesting thing is on microgrids, for example. This is a combination of using battery, for storage, coupled up with, say, wind or solar and stuff like that. You can use optimization algorithms to reduce the CO2 output as well, right? Those are a very, very small set of examples. And, if you do a search on Dan Jevons Shell, you'll see, a bigger picture there as well. He talks about it in greater detail about what AI can bring to bear. And there might even be some videos coming out soon, actually.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wayne. I'm just going to put into the chat right now the LinkedIn group that we all have. If there's certain topics that people want to continue the conversation on, I try to put a summary of a few tips on there every week as well, but I just put it into the chat. But thank you so much, Wayne, for sharing your experience with us and all of your insights. Really appreciate all the great questions too.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot that we can learn from you technically as well. And I know we talked about doing a meetup and showing the Shiny application and diving into that a bit deeper. So would love to do that as well.
Great. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you all. And if we're looking ahead to next week, we'll be joined by Lindsay Clark, Director of Data Science at Healthcare Blue Book as well. We are getting better about sharing the upcoming list here on the website too. But thank you all so much. Have a great rest of the day.